Hi everyone, welcome to this video. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is incredibly important for all coaches, even athletes who are watching out there, which is all about safety in a gym setting. So safety is again something which is always number one in terms of the priority. As a coach or as an athlete, you should never prioritize your performance over safety, or I would say never compromise safety in order for performance. So let's just delve right in and start by just getting a general overview of what are some factors to consider when we talk about safety in the gym.
Okay, first, maybe in this lecture itself, let me also clarify that Varun does have a bit of a bad voice and is still doing it. So do understand that this lecture, his questions, he is trying. So I'm thankful for that. Okay, just so that people know. Uh, Now, when it comes to safety, okay, in medical there's a rule: do no harm, and that same rule applies with strength and conditioning. Okay, do no harm. So how do we do no harm? One aspect now of not doing harm is that you don't do harm to the person by yourself physically, where you push them or you injure them with an exercise which is being done or a stretch which is being done. Okay, and the other aspect that comes where they can get injured is normally with either a free weight or a machine, because these are the things that are available in the gym. Okay, and possibly the fourth way is where they do something themselves and they maybe have a fall or something. Okay, so now first one, coming to the point where we injure them. How can that happen? Now, when is it that as a strength coach or maybe even a physiotherapist, when is it that they connect with another athlete's body to do something? It is mainly during passive stretches. When an athlete has played a match or probably after training, and then somebody is taking them through a passive stretches. Now, as safe as passive stretches are, and safe as the whole idea of passive stretching is, we have to realize that the end range, which is what improves flexibility, which also is what relaxes the person, is also the range where you can actually cause some form of damage. Okay, so to give an example there, let's assume somebody is doing a butterfly stretch, sitting on the floor, the feet are closely pulled in and the athlete is down. So now it's sometimes common, for even in martial arts, this is done to increase the flexibility of the adductors. There's pressure applied. Now, how much pressure should be applied? Should it be a lot, where you apply so much that the person just gets an injury, or do you know the end range? And how do you decide the end range? Now, a lot of times, many strength coaches, many physiotherapists go by the feel that they can know when you reach the end range. I would say put a safety measure there, put a filter there, where you ask the athlete. Okay, you ask the athlete like, okay, is this good enough? And if they say okay, fine. The other way you can ask is also you can use the RP scale. Okay, or you can just give them. I tend to use an even simpler way. I just tell them, look, think if 10 is the maximum that you feel where you are going to cry in pain, and 0 is nothing, then give me a number in between. Okay, or with some people I will say, give me in percentage, and in percentage I don't, to make it less complicated, I don't say 10, 20, 25. I'll say it's either 25 or it's 50% or it's 75% or it's 100. Okay, so when somebody is able to give you that feedback, why not take it? And this is where occasionally even our own egos have to be kept in check, where instead of asking the athlete, is this enough, and they say yes, I think this is good enough, we think like, hey, no, I know better. Who knows their body better than the athlete? So this is something, whether it's a training program or whether it's passive stretches, we have to ask. It can so happen that somebody pushes and it can actually cause a strain. Okay, and there are cases like this which happen where people stretch beyond a point, adductors, or they do the hamstring stretch, or sometimes they are doing something, maybe an extension for the back. You go beyond control, it can cause pain and it can cause unnecessary wastage of time. So these are real factors which can happen. So you should not do any passive stretch which is beyond their sort of comfort zone. Now, next area where it comes is, we're talking about one where we can give that sort of injury. Next becomes where an equipment can give an injury. And now when we get into equipment, there's like a whole big sort of basket that opens about where can an athlete get an injury. So let's look at it in a gym setting. Okay, where can an athlete get an injury? Because as a strength coach, you'll be mainly working in a gym, or maybe you'll be working on a ground to do some sessions there. So let's look at the gym first. Okay, so where can an injury happen? Now, one is if a weight drops on you. So where can a weight drop on you? It can be when you're specifically loading or unloading the bar. And people who sort of train for long, they would know that in bench press machines you have the stands at the end, so that where the stacking happens, if there's around 3 plates here and 3 here, the rack is almost this close to where the bars are loaded. Okay, now in some gyms, and this would be interesting for a lot of youngsters to know, back in the days around 25 years ago, I remember in the gyms for us, nobody sort of knew mechanics, nobody knew loading. We used to just have a bench which was there made by some person who just is a fabricator. And these gyms, those days it used to be, there's a bench, and then the stands would be just about here, straight up, rack. And then you put a bar, okay, and then you load. Now those who knew that, okay, 10 kilos here, 10 here, 20 here, 20 here. They tell one person to wait. Or then we learned that over time that if you're alone, then what you do, if you put 20%, or rather you put 20 kilo weight, you push it all the way till that weight comes right to the rack. You push it this way, okay. And then the other side, if you want to put, you go that side, then you bring it to the center. Then once it's at 20, then you could add 10, 10 even without shifting. But these are tricks you had to learn. Now, of course, there were people who didn't know this, and they would just go there and put a 20 kilo, bam, the weight just goes up, comes and hits you. And that weight and that bar going at that speed can cause serious injuries. Okay, so one area becomes there. Okay, now in gyms today, you notice that the bars being longer, mostly if it's even Olympic bars, the racks, the stands are right at the end. Even then, if too much weight is put here, it can still topple beyond a certain point. If you put say around maybe 50 kilos this side without anything, it won't be able to take that. It can take up to around 20, okay, maybe 25. So don't take a chance, number one, okay, about loading weight. Always be aware. Second, keep an eye out when somebody else is taking weights off. Okay, this is important because sometimes you could be just innocently doing an exercise and there's a weight stand next to you or your athlete, and the person who's there doesn't know. They genuinely don't know what's happening. They've just joined the gym and they are unloading weights which somebody else had loaded. And this person thinks, I want to do maybe just with the bar a shoulder press. So I'm going to take all this 100 kilo, 50 kilos which is there, I'm going to take it out. The person just starts taking 10, 20, 30, 40. So 50 is left and you're here. Okay, so in a gym, you have to be aware. You have to be aware of the surrounding, what's happening, who's training. Okay, so weights is one thing to be aware of. Okay, when somebody else is doing it or whether you're, when it comes to racking. The other aspect where we have to be careful about is obviously your own training. Let's say there's an athlete who's training and they are able to do maybe a bench press of say 80 kilos, 40 each side and the bar. Okay, and there's a good strong athlete. Now, where can they get injured? They can get injured if they use too much weight, more than what they can lift. What can be worse than that? Worse can be that they go down, they can't lift and there's no spotter behind. Okay, what can be even worse than that? That they are trying a heavy weight and they don't know technique. They just somehow take it down and think, oh, I'm going to impress people because I want to just see. Okay, so these are the common things which can make things sort of risky, where you lift more than what you can take. So with athletes, we have to be extremely careful because there are cases where strength coaches, trainers make athletes do exercises, and next thing you know, as they are doing a bench press, you can hear a sound, crack, a small tear, shoulders gone. Why? Because you are trying to do a maximal lift, which was more than what's needed in your program. So be careful of how much you can lift. And I have this rule, I've always said this to a lot of coaches, to people whom I teach. Don't go 100%, okay? And remember that the medals are not won in the gym, okay? So whenever you're lifting, and let's assume somebody is doing a bench press or doing a squat, takes a squat or doing a power clean. and you're lifting something which you can't, and you're thinking like, let me try, and you really swing in a power clean, you really swing your hips and get that bar up and you catch it, okay, with all the effort in the world. When you're at a threshold is when most likely something in that whole chain in your body, will snap. Do you want to take that chance? Is it worth it? What are you doing it for? I've explained this in other aspects of lectures earlier, that when a weightlifter lifts that weight all the way up and then from top he drops that weight, it's because there's a medal for the lifting in itself, right? There is no medal for somebody who's training by themselves and ends up doing a lift which he or she thinks, oh, that's the most I lifted ever, and it's amazing. So you have to be cautious of why you're lifting heavy. Heavy lifting, where you're training to your max threshold, has benefits and has risks. First, find out if your sport needs it. If it doesn't need it, rather do what's required most of the time. Also find out what is the age group of the children that you're working with, okay? If the age group is proper, good for you. If the age group is something that is too young and you want to start doing some lifts which are heavy, be careful. Sometimes we also have to take into account, especially when you're working with South Asian region athletes. Generally, South Asians won't have the same physical sort of strength or structure as maybe a Caucasian. And interesting studies have been done, and people can read about this, type, and you'll get interesting studies which are especially done by Imperial College in London, where they compared the structural differences between people, and they have found very clearly that in Bangladesh and regions of India, girls who are around 18 years old have the same height as girls who are 13 years old in the Norwegian countries, in the Nordic countries, okay. So now that's the difference. So now if somebody says that, oh, but in this particular country, maybe Denmark, Norway, Sweden, those athletes are lifting so much at age 14 or 15. Now, should you say that that's strength and conditioning, then I bring it and I make it applicable to an Indian athlete, who's going to sort of, do those exercises. So this is where cleverness comes in, or rather being clever comes in, okay, where you don't give exercises which are maximal unless they are necessary for that sport, okay. So one, you can injure the person. Second, the person can injure themselves by their own exercises or with your own prescription. And third becomes with an equipment, okay. So now equipment, like we said, one is barbells, okay. What is the other way? The other way is machines, okay. Now the machines are things, where sort of you do something and maybe you pinch your hand, or sometimes, there's a cable which is pulled and you have not noticed that the cable is worn out and the cable snaps, okay, and that impact which comes, you are not aware. So things like this about machines, you have to be aware. You have to be aware about your own sort of role as well, and the athlete. Then there's a fourth sort of way a person can get injured. Now, so far what we've spoken about is all extrinsic. Now we're talking intrinsic factors. What are intrinsic factors? Dehydration becomes one. Somebody has headache is one. Somebody is maybe having a bit of dizziness, and then if you're trying to make them do squats, that's another problem, okay. So intrinsic factors are when they are sick, when they have fever, when they are cramping. Sometimes you have to keep an eye on female athletes when they are training, whether they are having their monthly cycles. At that time, do you want to push them? So these are factors that you have to keep in mind about athletes, extrinsic and intrinsic both.
So, in your experience as a strength and conditioning coach who's worked with so many different players, different categories, different age groups, different sports, what are some incidents that you have come across where safety was maybe, neglected, and how the athlete may have suffered the consequences of that?
I have seen people fall off in gyms on treadmills. Not athletes, but regular people, and I'm sure maybe there are cases of athletes too. And basically what happens, a person gets on a treadmill, runs, the machine is on, they step off, okay, and they go because they want to get some water, and the machine is on, and somebody else walks in, and because the treadmill sort of that whole rolling part is black in color, right, so you can't really make out. It just appears like a black thing, though it's moving at high speed. And so other person comes in, gym is busy, they find, oh, this sort of treadmill is empty. They go step all over the place. So this is like very kind of a common thing, and there's a lot of videos sometimes we see on all the social media as well. I have seen weights drop and hurt people, and these are not, fortunately, not any of my athletes, but I have seen in general gyms while training, and that's one of the reasons why I'm extremely hyper about protection, because one thing people have to realize is that gym injuries are generally pretty bad. If a 20-kilo plate falls on your toes, it's not going to be very pleasant. It's going to do some serious damage. Something else with athletes, okay, I remind them, and this goes a bit out of context, but it is still about injury. Sometimes you have athletes sitting on the floor, right, and they are just chatting, and let's say there's somebody who's sitting like this, and let's say this person is now a tennis player, your table tennis, whichever sports which require the hand, which majority of sports require, and they have friends who are around, they're joking, they're having fun, and this person's standing, and somebody just pushes each other, and then this one person steps on this hand, the playing hand, okay, you can just imagine the damage that can come there. So these are things which, it's like protection is so important. You can't ever be off guard when it comes to safety. One can't ever think that, this is okay. So I've seen various injuries, in the gym, and it's sad, sometimes I've seen people in the gyms cramp because they've been just lifting so much. People have lifted to the point where they have to go out and vomit, okay. Now again, it looks very macho, it looks like, oh yes, I trained so hard that I had to, all my food came out. Now does that make sense? If you do a squat which was so heavy and you couldn't do, and your food came out, what did you gain? What are you trying to prove? And like I always say, did you get a medal for it? So we have to understand where to use intensity, how much to use, okay. And as far as injuries go, which I've seen, and which I have of course seen a lot more on social media, there are enough videos out there on platforms where you can see some injuries. Even to talk about it, it's like scary. You see people do a leg press and the weight is so heavy, when they go back and they go into literally into hyperextension, it's terrible to even see those. But why do they happen? Because of extreme heavy weights, okay, or extreme body positions, okay. So when extreme heavy weights do this, why do you want to do it unless you're a professional power lifter or a weightlifter, okay? Then you've at least got your body lifting suit, you've got your belt, you've got your knee wraps, you've got your wrist straps, you're all ready, and you've got spotters. Else, why are you lifting heavy? Are you lifting heavy just so that you can make a social media post and then say, oh, this is what I lifted? Is it worth it? So I think this is where we have to really understand that strength and conditioning is a profession where lifting is part of it, okay. Strength and conditioning is not about just lifting weights, right? It's about how you lift, when you lift, why you lift, okay. So injuries like this that I've seen on, like I said, social media, and this is not absolutely worth it. And I'm extremely strict about this when I work with athletes, especially young ones and even older ones, extremely strict, that when you touch a weight in the gym, you are not going to have fun with it. You are not going to talk when there's a weight in your hand. Because sometimes people have this habit, right? They've got the weights, they're doing shoulder press, and they say something, crack a joke. Somebody else cracks a joke and they sort of laugh along with it. I'm extremely almost like, to the point where I might not be liked, but that is it. Because I know if something goes wrong in the gym, who's in charge? Me. Under whose call did that happen? Mine. So strength and conditioning coaches need to understand this part, that anything goes wrong in the gym, you are accountable. You cannot say that the athletes were not listening, that they don't listen to you when you tell. It's your fault if they don't listen, okay. You cannot say that, when they come, I explained to them and still they went and did that exercise. It is still your fault because that area is under you. It's like, somebody where you go to a restaurant, okay, and you eat, and if you fall sick, is it your fault because, you ate? Or is it the person who cooked in that restaurant? Whom will you hold accountable? Okay, you can't say that this person went and ate there, so they were wrong. No, the person who has charged and who is in charge is wrong. So I think we have to be extremely strict with some things, and we have to be sort of, if there's discipline to be instilled, it's about lifting weights. How to, some things like putting the weights back, some things like, not leaving the dumbbells on the floor, because somebody could be walking and can be tripped. So some things like this are very important, And some things I would suggest which I do more as a cultural thing, but I think there's also the safety aspect of it. Back again, this I'm talking about possibly I think 1990. I remember the 1988, sorry, that really shows that I'm old. In 1988, uh, I remember the first time I joined the gym. Initially, I started training at home, then I went and joined the gym. And it was one of those typical, what's in Mumbai called Vyayam Shadas. Vyayam Shadas is like Vyayam is exercise and Shada is a school, so exercise school. And each of these would have this sort of, master, if you may call. Now, not everything was very scientific. A lot of the things they didn't know, why certain exercise is done, how much. But one thing was very clear, and I really appreciate that, and I'm thankful that I learned that. One thing was very clear, was that there's respect to that place. That was very, very clear. There's a master, that master is in charge. You come there, you exercise, you respect that place, and you leave. The place was not a social club. The place was not for joking. It was not a place where you're just hanging around somewhere on the street and talking. And there were a lot of different characters which would all train, from different sort of segments. I mean, I'm talking of a time when if you wanted to train, you could be a medical student, you could be somebody working in IT, or you could be just another guy, from the street. Everybody trains there. Now there are different segments, gyms, there are sort of much more posher gyms. And here we're talking about a time, when, the fees were 5 rupees. Okay, and then they became 10 rupees. So you can imagine what time we are talking about. And such gyms existed and they still exist. And this is where sort of one thing was very clear, was that respect for the teacher, respect for the equipment. Okay, one was also because the equipment the gym couldn't probably afford to get something new. So the dumbbells which were there, you didn't drop them. Okay, one very important thing which we had and which I follow till date is you are not allowed to cross a bar. So if there's a barbell there, you are not allowed to cross. Okay, you had to go around it, and you are not allowed to kick it. Now one might think, why not? It's very simple. If there's a bar, you cross over one, from a cultural point of view, it's disrespectful. It's like crossing over a book. We look at a book as knowledge, as Vidya, right? You keep it down. So when you're crossing over that, you don't disrespect. You respect it because that's the knowledge you want in you, right? So same way, going over would be disrespect. Okay, some people might say, I don't believe that, that's fine. The main thing becomes that when you cross over, the chances of tripping are high. So whichever way you look at it, culturally or safety wise, it doesn't make sense to cross over a bar. Make it a habit to go around. Okay, the chances of tripping, you could be the strongest guy, but if you're tired and as you're talking to somebody, or you've just done a lift, you've done a deadlift, kept the bar and you cross over, okay, the chances of tripping are high. So whatever way you look at it, don't cross over dumbbells. Okay, be aware of what's in your path. So one reason was this. Second reason, you are not allowed to touch the foot. From a cultural aspect, a book we wouldn't kick. Again, you want that Vidya to be in you. You want that knowledge to be in you. So you don't kick it and disrespect. Now somebody might say, okay, I don't think it's knowledge. Okay, why should you still do it? Because you kick a dumbbell, there could be somebody else who's walking. You kick a barbell, somebody else who's walking. Okay, and that barbell would not go straight. It normally, if you notice, if there's a barbell, you try to roll it, it goes one side. So again, somebody else who's walking, somebody else who's doing. I mean, these are equipment where the injuries are always generally harsh. So this is the reason why, whether culturally or whether just you look at it rationally, both ways it makes sense. Okay, and these things I feel sometimes I miss this about training. When the gym that I work in and where I train, my assistants train, it is a standard rule. Nobody kicks and is allowed to touch a dumbbell with their feet. Okay, and nobody is allowed to cross over. And I tell people this, not to do. And one of the other reasons, the third reason, if you may ask, is how I look at a dumbbell and a barbell is that is my bread and butter. That is literally what I earn a living from. I respect that. I respect the gym because the gym is where I come to train myself and train others as well. It has given me a lot. It gives you good health. So there is a respect. You leave that place, then it's different. You joke and this, that. But those dumbbells are not playthings. Those are not toys. Okay, it is not for fun. And I think when you have respect for anything, you learn better and you teach better. So that's the reason why when it comes to safety, I think first it begins with respecting the place, knowing why you come into that center, for what, and then getting the best that you can get out of that and then going. Okay, but it's a place of respect, just like a classroom. You get to a classroom in a university, what are you going there for? Okay. Generally, you notice, the front benches are the ones who study, look serious, and they sort of do their job. Then there'll be the back benches. Probably when we were in school, we used to be one of those. And then you don't study as much. Who scores better? Who gets the most out of it? The people who study. If you come to a classroom and disrespect, you don't listen to the teacher or disrespect the place, are you going to study? Are you going to absorb knowledge? And if you're not going to, then why have you come there? So it's sometimes, we have to ask people, even athletes, when they come to a gym, if they want to talk, we have to ask, why are you here? You're here to get strong. Is talking going to help you? If not, and I have had times, when I've sent people out, there have been times I've said, no, you're not training, you've been disrespectful, please, right now leave, you're not working. And they have learned the lesson, next time they know. So there are times when sometimes you have to do this. It's not a very normal thing, but you have to know that this is a place which is there for training. It's not a place to joke. Okay, and this can become, especially with, sometimes even athletes, because they're all strong, it can become that thing, where you lift everything, check in the mirror, check your muscles and crack a joke like, oh, I'm here looking. So one has to realize this is a place as serious as any other place. Okay, if it's a football player on the field, you want them to play. You get out, you have fun. Okay, so I think these are things to remember. And one example I can give you what I teach, and one example I'll give you of an athlete who went through an injury. So what I teach about, I'll say, like, if we look traditionally in India, when wrestlers get into the fighting pit, into the circle, you'll notice what they will do as just as they enter, they put their hand down and they do this and come in. Now what's the significance? You are getting into an area which you can say is like what's called your karma bhumi. Okay, so karma bhumi is what? Your bhumi is your land and karma is what you will do. So whatever you do, any winning that will happen, any medals you'll win is inside that circle for that wrestler. So any tennis player who will win anything in their life, whether a world number 1 or state champion, will win inside that. So you have to respect that space. You're in there to work. When it's done, you're out. So you have fun once you're out. So I think same applies to a gym. You enter the gym door, you're in there to do a job and you're there to get out. Okay. But when you've got in, and I can understand, no, not all the time you can be serious, but when you have weights in your hand, you've held something, you're on a machine, stop everything, focus on that. Now, if somebody has to talk while doing an exercise machine, or they have to talk while doing a power clean, or they have to talk while, then what's really the point? What have you come here for? Okay, so these are things I think when it comes to safety, we have to realize that it starts with respect. The other incident I was to tell you about injuries is, there is a very good athlete, I wouldn't want to explain which sport, but this has happened, where just before going to competition, the trainer got very excited, made them do some bench presses heavy, and in the shoulder literally they heard a sound, and that's it, couldn't go for the competition. Another time, another athlete trying to jump over a box, plyometrics, the trainer making them do last minute, just heavy. The person was tired, come on, you can do. Tries to jump over, hits their shin badly, starts bleeding. Okay, the box topples, this person falls, their ankle is hurt, they go for competition, can barely move. Another player in another sport, trainer makes them do, again, the king of all exercises, which is very good, squats. The player has a history of back pain, makes them do, try squats, back goes into a spasm. Okay, player can't play. 1 week the player is out. After 1 week comes back, again makes them do squats with slightly lesser weight, but squats, because why? Squats are king of all exercises. Again does it, player's back again goes into spasm. So this is where we have to learn that you can't come with a fixed program saying that this is what the workout is, and then like you're going for competition but you haven't finished the workout. Sometimes it's okay to do less. You don't have to make it that everything has to be, it's not homework, right? It's about the body. The athlete is ready, your work is already done. Why do you have to be so serious and get after the athlete? So these are things, last moment, when these examples I've given of these athletes, and these are international level athletes, who gained from this? Did the player gain? Did the athlete gain? Did the club gain? Was there money that was wasted? Obviously so many things, so when you're not going to gain anything, don't push for no reason. Okay.
So I think you've covered quite extensively about the safety factor when it comes to the coach as well as the athlete. So I just wanted to delve a little more deeper and understand about the practice of spotting and what are some things to keep in mind and also the safety factors associated with it.
Okay, before I get to that, let me explain to all those who are watching is also that the AC is not working, so we are sweating quite a bit, but it's okay, it's not too bad. So it's not that we are nervous and we are sweating, just so that you know. Okay, now spotting. What is a spotter's job? A spotter's job is to spot. Okay, so if somebody is doing a bench press, you're there to check. If somebody is doing a military press, you're there to stand behind. It's extremely important that the spotter is strong enough to support. You don't want somebody just there for moral support. You want somebody for physical support. Okay, and the spotter needs to know at which point they have to support. Now, I'll give an example of somebody maybe who does pull-ups. Okay, so not everybody can do pull-ups, but there are some people who need some support. So first thing to do while you're spotting is ask the person, after how many pull-ups would you need support? The person says, I think I can do 3 myself and then 2 I need support. Fair enough. Now you know. So let them do 3, then you move. Okay. If the person says that I can't do even 1, so I want support, then you know, okay, that from the beginning you have to give. So then ask them, you want support all the way till up or you just want in the beginning? Okay. So they'll tell you, I just want it in the beginning. Check after that, you know, that okay, are they doing the pull up with their knees bent or are their legs straight? Then ask them, you know, where would you like support from? Is it under the ankles or do you want support at the shoulder area? And you have to be extremely careful here, especially while working with female athletes. You know, ask them exactly where do they want support. If you end up thinking that the hip wants and you touch, they might think you're touching inappropriately, which it would be. So you have to be careful about these things, you know, about exact spotting where you want to do support, where you want to give. So first ask how much, okay, then ask, you know, from which point they want, like which sort of, you know, is it the legs, is it the shoulder, and so on. Now, if there's someone, you know, who's say doing a bench press, okay, or any lift for that matter, I think the worst thing a spotter can do is to give extra help. And this is again very common. You have sometimes very over-enthusiastic spotters, you know, you tell them, okay, stand behind, and they literally lift the weights for you. Okay, so you don't want a spotter and be that spotter, you know, who's just lifting so much that the athlete is doing nothing. Okay, so if they're going down, you ask how do they want to be spotting you. Do they just want some support at the wrist, okay, where you grab the wrist so that they get a nice sort of strong feel and feel more stable, and you just help them guide the weight up. Is that what you want, or is it somebody who's wearing a weight sort of belt and you've got 2 spotters on the side and then you're the one who's supporting? Some people like chest support. They'll grab from behind and they'll help lift the person up. That's a bit more sort of direct. Is that what you want? Again, working with females, you have to be careful. Now, I would say if you're working with a female who's doing that, I'd make them do a Smith machine, unless they're maybe, you know, powerful athletes in power sport who really, and they should know, if you're spotting, it should be very clear. If you're going to touch a body part, it has to be very clear. Even a passive stretch as well, it has to be very clear, and you should make it clear. And make sure, one thing I would say, make sure that when you're doing any static stretch, passive stretches, or whether you're doing this sort of lifts and spotting, and if you're going to touch, let that be in a public space, okay, where it's everybody's aware. And most important, especially with female athletes, when you're working and if you're going to spot, you have to ask, are you comfortable if I touch you here? It could be your student for 20 years, it could be a student for 10 years. Make sure they know. You don't want them to feel uncomfortable at any point, okay? So make sure that spotting wise, you help and spot enough. Sometimes it can be arranged. Let's say there's somebody who's doing a military press and they come down with the barbell, okay, and as they're going up, they might just need help in the inner range till around here until they cross parallel with their upper arm. From here, they are good to go into tricep extension and finish off. And you need to support exactly where they are weak. Spotting does not mean you just spot them, you hold here and you push for them. Then there's no point. You have to make sure, ask. That's why you have to ask exactly. And also a good spotter, as they are lifting, also knows, okay, that okay, this is where from here they can push, so they know to take their hand off. Okay, a bad spotter will be somebody who's just there. A worst spotter is somebody who's doing that and also talking to somebody else. How was that movie the other day? And it's just doing that. So sometimes the joke goes, that you're helping somebody else and you're not spotting, you're actually doing a good bicep curl because you're just doing your exercises while you're all the way. And if someone's doing a bench press, you sort of end up lifting and they are not lifting anything, you're helping them, okay. So you don't want to be that kind of a spotter, right? Another thing for spotters to remember is, especially with lifts like maybe a bench press, okay, sometimes the positioning of the benches is such that not every bench you can help with the weight in the right way, okay. Sometimes you need to step on a bench and be able to give, otherwise that load comes a lot on your shoulders or sometimes on your back. So you have to make sure, as for spotting, first make yourself safe. Along with that, make the athlete safe as well. And pay a lot of attention. Spotting is serious business, because spotting means that the person is training beyond their threshold. Very simple. Right? If you are spotting somebody, it's nothing but training beyond their threshold. Threshold training is where most injuries happen. So you have to be extremely careful of what you're doing. Okay, you have to be careful and very clear that you're helping them to get that sort of bar from point A to point B, and then when it's over, to put it back as well. So I'll give an example of, say, the bench press and spotting in that. Let's say there's a strength athlete and they do bench press and you're standing behind to spot. If the weight is too heavy and you know that you and that athlete cannot lift it up, you need two spotters else, okay, one here, one here. Because what can happen is, let's assume that 1 in a million chance when the weight goes down, the athlete can't get it up. Now they can't push it up. You don't have the strength to maybe take 120 kilos and put back. Now you are in a problem, okay, because you're stuck there. So you want two others so that if the weight is so much that you can't put it back, they're there to assist. If it's a lightweight, maybe it's a female athlete who's training and probably it's around 40-50 kilo bench press, you know that, okay, fair enough, you can stress and put it back yourself. But if you're not able to, it's okay to ask for help. It's not your ego to think that I'm here to take care of you, okay. So make sure there's spotters when you can't lift it yourself. The other thing is now to also remember that when doing a bench press, and I'm giving examples which can be applied to all sports or all lifts. When you lift, ask the person whether they need help to take the bar off the rack, okay. So if it's a bench press and let's say there's a bar here and the person's holding, ask them if they want it up to here, okay. Many people need it, and then ask them, from here do I take my hands off? So you need to know exactly the whole lift. You need to know exactly where you stop helping, and you need to know exactly where you start helping again. So you take it off. In an ideal situation from a bench press competition point of view, you'll notice the guys will be standing there, two guys there, they'll all help, wait, when the guy says, okay, I'm ready, they'll take off, stand, okay. And the taking hands off has to be a very clear action, so the person knows off, out, so your hands are open, okay, and then you're stepping away. They do the lift. Once they've come up, catch, everybody is there, verbal communication, the person can pass, information saying that no, catch. So we're all aware, everybody is on the same page, okay. One more thing to notice in this is that different forms of spotting can happen when you're working with, obviously not everybody is going to lift very heavy. Say somebody is doing a lift, okay, they can spot themselves as well when they do single arm movements. So if someone's doing a tricep extension, okay, with dumbbells, they can use the other hand, okay. If they are doing lying down and they are doing a cross body extension, they can use this hand, and it all depends. They can move from full hand to fingers, okay. So from full hand you can move to 4 fingers, to 3 finger support, 2 finger support, to 1 finger support, okay. So there's almost like this very minute change, where you can sort of regress or progress with the weight, okay. So you can support yourself as well. If somebody is doing even bicep curls, maybe single arm, they can go up. If there's nobody, they can use this hand light enough to just again to cross what's called that sticking point. In lifting there's always a sticking point. In bench press is somewhere around here. So you want to just help them cross the sticking point, let them finish the lift again. Go down, they lift again, sticking point, boom, again. So these are things over time with training, being more in the gym, learning how weights work, it makes you better and better. But the idea of spotting is not to make the lift easier, it is to make the lift efficient. You want that player to get the most out of that lift. And one thing to remember is that if they need a spotter, then that means they can't lift it themselves. And that means everybody has to be switched on, that hey, now we're doing something very serious. So with lifting heavy and spotting, I think we all have to be aware that we are in some serious work at that time. Probably I would say one of the most serious things that is done in a gym is spotting, and that is when we have to be aware, because that's when heavy lifting is happening. So we have to be aware, the spotters have to be aware, the lifter has to be aware, people around have to be aware not to be in that region. Okay. So I think when it comes to spotting, it's actually very serious business. It's the most serious part of the workout for any athlete or for any individual. And I think we really have to be sort of switched on to know that the help given is happening perfectly, not a kilo extra of force, not a kilo less. And that's an ideal spotter. And you want somebody who assists you to get better. You don't want somebody else who does the lift for you. Okay. And when it comes to safety, we all see a lot of very common thing. What is it in safety that people use when they want to lift? A belt, right? So there's lifting belts. So now many people don't realize what a belt is worn for. The whole idea about the belt is to create intra-abdominal pressure, right? Now what is intra-abdominal pressure? It's pressure around here, and sometimes it's even pressure that is created around the thorax as well, top. So you wear a belt as tight as you can. So there's a lot of pressure, and the reason why you need pressure here is because in this whole region around the waist, there's only the vertebral column which is solid. The rest is all just soft tissue. So that soft tissue cannot really carry weight. A strong structure, like if I place a weight on top of my hand, obviously it can, because there's bone and then there's muscle around. Okay, but there's bone which carries. So as long as the bone can carry, there's a lot of weight that this can take. But now imagine if this was just flesh, there was just meat and there was just one bone. So that bone is going to take the pressure. So that's what happens when people try squats, deadlifts, many lifts. The load comes on the vertebral column. So what do we do to avoid that? We wear a belt to create intra-abdominal pressure. So there's around that whole spine, there's like a pillar. Rather than one bone now, there's that pressure which is around and creates like a pillar on which weight can rest this way or from down. But that pillar now is giving support to that spine as well. Instead of that taking the load and just the lower back muscles, now everything around is helping. Now when do you want this support? Okay, when do you want this pillar to work? You want this for maximum lifts. Okay, this is very important for guys to understand, okay, for all people training in the gyms, athletes as well. You want that pressure to only do things which you cannot do with your normal back muscles. You don't want to use it for things that you can lift. So if let's say a person can do a squat, maybe 10 reps, okay, with 80 kilos, and they are doing with good form, do they need a belt for it? No. Because if they can do it without a belt, you don't want to use the belt. In fact, what does happen is if you use the belt too often, your lower back muscles don't learn to engage and work because they're always relying on this belt. So when does a belt come into play? A belt is important for those who are into strength sports, where they just need maximal strength. They want their body to be able to lift the most possible. And that's what happens with those who are into powerlifting. They wear a suit. So again, there's a lot of stiffness that comes in the hip and everything, and they are able to squat, down, and when they squat down, everything's tight. They go down with a tight sort of suit, they go down, up again. Then there'll be something what's called the bench press suit, which is again very tight. So you see them wear, and they walk really like this because they are so stiff. So when they're lying there, they just lie, get onto the bench, hold down. So the bench press suit gives them some support to come down and push. Okay. Now again, I keep saying, why do they do that? Because they want to win lifting the most. Does your athlete need this? And does your athlete need to be wearing a belt or a costume like that when sort of they are lifting something that they can lift? So sometimes you see, in gyms and stuff, you have guys who'd be wearing a belt and then they are doing bicep curls. And that really becomes a question of what are you doing bicep? What is the support? You're taking 10 kilo dumbbells and using it. It's not a belt for style. It's not a belt which is worn just to show that I'm some tough guy, and look how it's a bicep curl. You are not able to do a bicep curl without wearing a belt. That actually becomes a joke. So we have to really realize the belt is not a fashion accessory. The belt has a specific role only for extreme heavy lifting. You should be able to lift most things without the belt. And why this is important to understand again, what happens when people are injured? Okay, when somebody has back pain, elderly people, even youngsters, they are given a corset support. They wear that sort of back support. You know why? Because again, it creates intra-abdominal pressure, this support. Okay. Now, ideally, would they want to wear that or would they not want to wear that? They would not want to wear that around, right? If they have to wear that, it means they're injured. If you're not injured and you're wearing it, it's like somebody who wears a bandage without any injury. Okay. So you have to understand that the belt is only for extreme heavy lifting to assist you to lift more weights. It is not to help you just to sort of look good or just to think as if like I'm wearing it. The other thing, you finish a lift and this becomes very funny to watch. You have guys who will wear it for maybe using a bicep curl, okay, do bicep curls with a belt and then they walk around with it, okay. A belt is to be used for heavy lifts. You have to get used to it, wear, quickly get it to the tightest point possible, and that's why you'll see powerlifters, weightlifters, when they wear, they'll wear it as tight. They want to create as much tightness and sort of intra-abdominal pressure so that it's so tight they can actually the stomach pushes against and there's like a tightness and there's pressure there. And they'll generally have somebody else wear it because it needs to be at the sort of tightest point that they'll wear. And as soon as it's over, what do you want to do? You want to take it out. Okay, because you don't want that pressure. That intra-abdominal pressure is not great so much for no reason. Okay, so you want to finish that lift, come out, take it out, relax. Okay, but on the contrary, you see people just wear the belt and just sort of walk around the whole gym literally for an hour. They'll keep it on as if sometimes they just book it, and nobody else can use who actually wants to lift heavy. Because these guys have just got this belt thinking like as if I'm this tough guy in the gym and I'm this so and so. So belts have a reason. Okay, they're there for safety. It's one of the safety equipment in the gym. So we need to know about these things. There's chalk that is used again for lifting. So there are reasons. One thing I would say, yeah, to be careful of those who do explosive lifts. It's very tempting, right? People lift weights and then go drop it. Okay, you have to first check what type of gym. Is it on the first floor? Is it on the ground floor? What are the rules? If it's a lifting platform, if you're going to drop weights, you get what's called crash pads. Many lifters are not aware of this, and many gyms you go, it becomes almost unbearable to stand there because people drop weights, okay? And they keep dropping weights and the sound, the whole safety for the structural integrity of the building, right? Dropping something from such height, is it good? Again, that's a question. But you can have what's called crash pads. You get this sort of, pillows or rather like these square boxes that are made, long ones, where you can drop the weight and it absorbs a lot of the shock. Okay, so get those done, okay, so that you don't just protect the flow, you also create less noise, and this also becomes something else for safety. And the bar will sort of not bounce as much because that bar falling down, bouncing noise wise, if somebody who's not trained is walking around, the chances of injury for them. So these are things which we have to keep in mind because the gym is definitely not a very safe place for everybody. It's like a factory. You walk into a factory, right? And then there's always certain guidelines. People wear safety boots in factories when they work on ships in sort of industries. Why do they wear safety boots? Because there's heavy equipment. Something can drop on your toes and it can finish your toes with normal shoes. So a gym is very similar. There's weights around, there's iron lying around, there's machines which are having a lot of sort of cables pulling, but it's all iron everywhere. Or there are fast moving places like a treadmill. Okay, so you have to make sure that it's a safe place. Okay, always be aware. Intrinsic and extrinsic, both ways, make sure you're safe and your athletes are also safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, I think it's very important to understand why something is being used and when it has to be used rather than just using it for the sake of it. And even going back to the topic of spotting, I think sort of just to summarize everything, I think clarity would be most important well before the lift even begins. Absolutely. Rather than figuring things out as you go on. Because in my experience, I've seen some very unfortunate incidents due to the simple neglect of the count, where you go 1, 2 and you lift at 3, or do you go 1, 2, 3, go. That 1 second difference is enough to have that miscommunication and an issue.
Even how many reps?
Exactly.
Somebody thinks, that you think after 3 it's over and the person is going down and you've taken your hands off. So yeah, clarity, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Great. So I think for all our viewers out there also, I hope that this discussion not only has helped you stay safe during your workouts, but more importantly also when you're working with other clients, and just overall to have a much better understanding of all the different things in the gym, how it has to be used, and like I said, most importantly, how do you keep everyone safe. Thank you.